Starting the 2+2 dialogue, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis met India's Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in New Delhi this morning. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also met his Indian counterpart, External Affairs Minister of India Sushma Swaraj, for that high-level dialogue. During the talks, Pompeo said the U.S.-India relationship is growing steadily since Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the United States last year. He also said that U.S. supports India's rise as a leading global power and welcomes New Delhi's equal commitment to this partnership. The U.S. Secretary of State also added that the U.S. is hoping to discuss how India can work with the U.S. to achieve the fully verifiable denuclearization of North Korea.
Our partnership has been steadily growing since Prime Minister Modi visited the White House last June. And President Trump is eager for it to continue, and he told us, Secretary Mattis and I, that before we departed. We fully support India's rise as a leading global power, and we welcome India's equal commitment to our partnership. Our two nations are united by shared values of democracy, respect for individual rights, and a shared commitment to freedom.
India's Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj representing India at the talks. Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said the commencement of the US-India ministerial dialogue is a concrete manifestation of the vision of Prime Minister Modi and President Trump to take India-US relationship to a higher trajectory.
Today's meeting marks a defining moment in our bilateral ties. The commencement of the first ever ministerial 2+2 between India and the United States is a concrete manifestation of the vision of our leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump, to take the India-US relationship to an even higher trajectory. This meeting is also a reflection of the tremendous progress that we have made in developing our ties over the past few years.
India's leadership in the world supports our shared democratic values regionally and globally. We also recognize increasing connectivity between Indian and Pacific Oceans, renaming U.S. Pacific Command to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. With India as a major defense partner, we are elevating our defense relationship to be on a par with our closest allies as we deepen the broader U.S.-India relationship, enhancing our interoperability, our defense trade, our technology innovation and industrial collaboration, and bolstering our people-to-people bonds.
Joining us for more on that and for unraveling the key takeaways so far is former Ambassador of India to the United States, Ambassador Arun Singh. Ambassador, thanks very much once again for speaking with us here on Wion. Ambassador, let me also ask you to point out for us what the either side really hopes to achieve through this summit when it comes to the issues of mutual concern, particularly when it comes to terrorism. That's important because of the statements that were made by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during his visit to Pakistan, right before his visit to India.
There will be several important issues to be discussed in this meeting of common concern to the two countries. For example, Afghanistan, because US has sustained the military effort in Afghanistan now for almost 17 years. And India has done a lot of development work in Afghanistan, but broadly within the security framework provided by the United States. Now the US is talking in terms of some kind of a political reconciliation, ending the military effort. They are talking directly to the Taliban. So India would need to understand what are the US plans and what are the implications for India's security as a result of this. So that would be an important area. The second would be Iran. The US sanctions on Iran have kicked in again. And as of 6th August, we cannot use US dollars in any transaction related to Iran. From 4th November onwards, there will have to be significant reduction in oil imports from Iran. Now, these are all going to raise costs for India at a time when oil prices are rising. The value of the rupee has declined. So again, one has to understand that when the US talks about significant reductions in oil purchases from Iran, what are the parameters? At the time of the Obama administration, it was projected as about 20% reduction every 6 months. But so far, there has been no clarity from the Trump administration. So there will be a need for clarity. Again, there would be important discussions on Russia, because Russia is a very important political and a strategic and defense partner for India. Almost 60% of our defense inventory is of Russian origin. And the US has now imposed sanctions on Russia. And under the US law, which is the Countering American Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, the CAATSA, any country that does a major defense purchase from Russia can be liable to US sanctions. And it is important for the US to explain to the Indian leaders that that provision would not be used against India, because if that happens, then the US would not be seen as a reliable partner. So again, that is an important area. And the Indo-Pacific, and Secretary Mattis referred to the Indo-Pacific because the US is defining a new area of focus for them in terms of security from the west coast of India to the west coast of the United States. And the whole aim for everyone is to deal with the consequences of a rising China, and not to contain China, not to push back China, but to deal with the consequences of a rising China. So everyone is talking in terms of new networks of security. We have the India-US relationship. There is the India-US-Japan trilateral. There is India-US-Japan-Australia quadrilateral. There are cooperation arrangements through ASEAN. So there will be a need to understand that going ahead, what kind of security architecture, networks of the relationships US has in mind, which would also serve India's interest. And in the framework of that, what would be the security architecture in the Bay of Bengal or in the Indian Ocean region, which are absolutely adjacent to India and critical for India. And that takes us to the question of terrorism, because whatever is happening in Afghanistan, and again the terrorism directed against India, is based in Pakistan. So that issue needs to be addressed. And while in August last year, in his speech and then in his tweet in January this year, President Trump had been very tough on Pakistan. But after that, the sense is that in the framework of negotiations with the Taliban, space has again been created for Pakistan to influence the processes in Afghanistan. So given that, the fact that Secretary Pompeo, after talking to the new Pakistani Prime Minister some weeks ago, had said that he had referred to the fact that Pakistan needs to take action against terrorist groups, which Pakistan initially denied, that he had said no such thing, but the US stood by his position. And then Secretary Pompeo, after his visit to Pakistan, has reiterated that message. So Pakistan's stopping support to terrorist groups that it helps, facilitates, sponsors, will be very, very critical. And I think that will be an important point of discussion between India and the US during the 2+2.
Indeed. Ambassador, stay on with me as we delve deeper into the various issues that come to the table when these talks are concerned. Of course, these talks between the top US officials and Indian ministers garnering a lot of attention. The reason here is quite simple. There is a tectonic shift in a way from the Nehruvian policy of non-alignment. India and the US are inching closer militarily, and one of the key areas of talks among the foreign and defense ministers of India and the US is COMCASA. We will talk in greater detail about that as well. But for now, standing by for that joint press conference, which is to be addressed by the top officials from the US and from the Indian side, External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj, and India's Defense Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, joined by the two US Secretaries of State. A lot on agenda, as Ambassador Arun Singh and I were just pointing out. A lot of expectations when it comes to this crucial 2+2 dialogue between India and the US. Also coming at a very important time when there has been an increase in the relationships, increase in the dialogue between the two countries, and the relationship seeing furtherance over the last few weeks. The two sides will be talking in greater detail on what was discussed, what lies ahead, and how these talks will actually shape the India-US relationship in the days ahead. A lot when it comes to security issues.
Good afternoon, friends.
To issues of mutual concurrence that will be pointed out.